Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I want to tell you a little secret that's actually not a secret to anyone who knows me well. Your rabbi is terrible at math. Awful. It's egregious. I'm not exactly sure why, but basically ever since I could remember, I have been bad with numbers. Now, while I might be dumb with math, I'm smart enough to know that if you can't do something, you should ally yourself with someone who can. So I married a chemist, and her science and math skills make up for my lack of math knowledge, and so she ends up doing all the mathy stuff in our house, like taxes and all that. When I applied to rabbinical school, this is a true story, I'm not embellishing this at all. When I applied to rabbinical school, they decided to be evil and make me take the GRE, because rabbinical school is like basically another form of graduate school. So there's several parts to the GRE, and I scored off the charts in language arts in that part of the test because I was an English teacher. But then they told me, this is sad, they gave me an official report, and it said, it's true, only 3% of people who have ever taken the GRE in recorded history, 3% scored lower on the math than I did. I might as well have taken it in like crayon or something. It's awful. And while I should be really ashamed of this fact for whatever reason, I'm somewhat impressed. I tell you, only 3% of people. So if you're worried about my math skills affecting my job as rabbi here at Agudas Hakim, nobody has asked me to find the circumference of a circle while I'm on the bima, but it still affects my psyche. The sphere of math infiltrates my dreams. The other night I had a classic math nightmare. This one is recurring. I'm in high school, and my math teacher hands me my final exam. And I look at that, and even though I've studied tremendously for it, it might as well be written in Japanese. No idea what's on the page. I look at the numbers, I look at the formulas, all of it. None of it registers at all in this dream. So I begin to sweat, I begin to panic. So the teacher says, "No worries, Jonathan, this is an open note test." So Dream Jonathan takes out my notes. Likewise, they make no sense. Seeing that my notes aren't helping, you know this is really a dream because the teacher says, "No worries, Jonathan, you can use a friend's notes." So Dream Jonathan gets notes from a classmate. That doesn't work either. Finally, the teacher just says, "Jonathan, just look at someone else's test. For the love of God, copy their answers so we can get out of here." But in Math Dream, Jonathan can't even do that. Can't even cheat off of someone. Very pathetic. That's when I wake up in a cold sweat and I have to remind myself that I haven't taken a math class in like 16 years. And I have to remind myself that I'm a fairly successful rabbi who tells stories about Moses. I don't have to know the Pythagorean theorem. I don't have to find the slope of a line. I don't need to do any of that. I think we can all agree that dreams can cause pain. The other night, middle of the night, I was woken up to literal screaming coming out of my 6-year-old's room. And I went into his bedroom because he was shaking in fear because of a nightmare that he had. Poor little guy, only 6. So the solution, I got him out of bed and we went into the living room and we watched funny cat videos on the internet. Cats playing with yarn, cats falling over. And it took him a while to calm down. And I think the reason that is because when you dream, sometimes it's so incredibly lifelike. And all the emotions that we experience in the real world are channeled through our brains and they manifest in our psyche. And when we're at the most rest, we really become vulnerable to not being at rest at all. Sometimes our dreams and our desires can actually cause genuine pain. As someone who is interested in public speaking, I've oftentimes thought about perhaps the greatest public speech, I think, delivered in recent modernity. It's Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. Now, it's hard to watch the whole thing. The family still owns the copyright, but you can watch bits and pieces of it. I suggest you do. In it, the civil rights leader outlines his dream for greater race relations between whites and African Americans in the South. And while I believe that this speech is poignant and beautiful, fascinating, and just beautifully and articulately delivered, I can't help but notice, and I hate to even point out, that less than 5 years after Dr. King delivered it, he was assassinated outside of his hotel room by a murdering bigot assassin. You see, our dreams can cause real pain. In our Torah portion for the week, Vayigash, which is actually the first Torah portion of 2025, we get one of the final scenes of the Joseph story, which is very climactic to say the least. We see Joseph, once a Hebrew slave, now second in command of all of Egypt. He's addressing his brothers in one of the rooms of his palace, but they don't know that it's Joseph that's addressing them. He's adorned in Egyptian garb. They don't know who it is. They think it's just another Egyptian royalty. And after they confront each other, the Torah tells us that Joseph orders all of his servants out of the room. And he finally admits to his family that he is indeed their brother. And what's interesting and beautiful and haunting, really, about this particular part of the Torah is the text tells us, quote, "He wept aloud, and all of the Egyptians heard, and the whole house of Pharaoh heard." Apparently, Joseph was so upset that although he ordered his servants out of the room, the whole kingdom heard his wails, his cries. Everyone in Pharaoh's court could hear his emotional outbursts as he could no longer contain the hurt that he had held on to for all of those years. And when I read this story, I can't help but thinking that all of the problems that Joseph is experiencing were because initially, when he was just a young shepherd boy, he began to have dreams. At first, he would recount his dreams to his older brothers, mentioning to them how in his dreams they bowed down to him. And as we know, these dream descriptions created an intense jealousy among his siblings. A jealousy that would lead them to eventually almost murder him, fake his death, and sell him into slavery. Joseph's dreams would later cause more pain when he interprets the dream of the baker in prison and tells him that Pharaoh will have him killed in 3 days. So yes, friends, as I've mentioned, dreams can cause pain. But as we know, very few things in Jewish tradition are white or black. So while dreams can cause pain, they also contain tremendous hope. In Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams that warns the country of an upcoming famine, without Joseph's input, Egypt wouldn't have been able to prepare itself properly, and millions of people would have starved to death. Likewise, historians have pointed to the "I Have a Dream" speech as a pivotal point in the American civil rights movement, and they suggest that without it, the outcome of equal rights for Black Americans might not have come as soon as it did without Dr. King's insightful and prophetic words. And lastly, while my dreams of math are especially haunting and frightful to me, without those dreams, I would not have had the capacity to write the sermon that you're hearing now. So yes, while dreams while dreams can cause pain, they can also change our world for the better. So friends, tonight as we begin our first Shabbat of 2025, I want to ask you, what are your dreams for this new year? What are your hopes, your aspirations, and your desires? Will you use your dreams to inspire yourself or inspire others? Or will your dreams only enable your fear, your insecurities, and possibly, God forbid, your nightmares? I think if the Joseph story can teach us anything, it's that just when we think it's over, it's really not over. And our dreams can change our lives more than we think. So I want to encourage us this evening, if we have positive dreams for ourselves or perhaps our family or our loved ones in 2025, we should really seek to use those dreams to embolden our best selves. After all, Joseph started off as a simple shepherd boy in a colorful coat and ended up being in control of all Egypt. I want to bless us all with a beautiful new secular new year. And I want to end with a quote from my favorite doctor of mathematics. And because I don't know much about math, I just chose one from Dr. Seuss. He says, and I'll end with this quote, "You have to be odd to be number one." Shabbat shalom.